The IEP Process, What the General Education Teacher Needs to Know by Joanna Clippinger. Intervention specialists, adaptive physical education teachers, school librarians, guidance counselors, administrators, school nurses, therapists, and general education teachers are all vital to the education of students with disabilities. Students with special needs cannot reach their full potential without the support of these professionals. You, the general educator, is the expert in your subject area. Students of all abilities need you to share your knowledge with them in order for their educational goals to be met. Many general education teachers are not well trained in the IEP process, and some may be uncomfortable working with intervention specialists and IEP holders. The purpose of this PowerPoint is to educate general educators on the IEP process so they can confidently help students meet their learning goals. In 1975, Congress enacted the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, sometimes referred to as IDEA, in order to guarantee that all children with disabilities are able to receive a free and appropriate public education. According to IDEA, without any charge to the parents, schools must provide students with disabilities an education that meets the state standards and is consistent with the IEP goals of each student. IDEA also ensures that students with special needs be educated in the least restrictive environment possible. Least restrictive environment means children with disabilities must be taught alongside their non-disabled peers. The least restrictive environment for each student is determined by individual need and is based on the student's IEP. In 2001, Congress strengthened students' rights by passing No Child Left Behind, which requires children to meet the educational needs of all students by hiring highly qualified teachers and to use research-based programs and interventions to improve student performance. No Child Left Behind allows schools to evaluate students' performance based on the accommodations or modifications outlined in the student's IEP. Important to the general education teacher, No Child Left Behind mandates that students with disabilities have access to the general education curriculum. The law of IDEA does not only protect the rights of students with disabilities, but also protects the rights of their parents as well. According to IDEA, school districts must provide parents a written explanation of parental rights in the IEP process. This explanation should be written in the native language of the parents. Parents also have the right to be invited to all meetings about their child's educational plan. Parents may ask questions and provide input during these meetings. Parents also can have copies of their child's educational records. Parents can give permission for their child to be evaluated to determine if he has special educational needs. Parents are also allowed to obtain their own independent evaluation to present to the school district. There are times when it may be appropriate for a family to place their child with special needs in a setting other than the public school. Parents have the right to understand the requirements of an alternative. If a parent feels his or her child's rights have been violated, they have the right to be heard through mediation, due process hearings, appeals, and civil action. If the court decides in favor of the parents, the school district must pay for the parents' attorney's fees. School districts, administrators, and even individual classroom teachers can face legal action against them if they do not follow the laws under IDEA. Because of the rights of the students and their parents and the legal responsibilities of the school district and its employees, it is imperative that every teacher understand the IEP process and uphold the IEP as a legally binding document. Now that the laws associated with special education have been explained, let's discuss the purpose and the process of the IEP. The IEP is a legal document that establishes the educational plan for a child with disabilities. The IEP consists of the diagnosis of the disability, a description of services the district will provide, the student's goals and objectives for the year, and modifications or accommodations to the standards or to assessments. The IEP can be considered a blueprint for school districts and teachers to follow to provide a student with the best education that fits his individual learning needs. The IEP process can be divided into 7 steps: pre-referral, referral, identification, eligibility, development of the IEP, implementation of the IEP, and evaluation and review. Let's look at each step individually. The pre-referral. In the pre-referral stage, a parent, a teacher, or other staff member has recognized a student is struggling academically, socially, or behaviorally. The student is given more individualized, research-based intervention in the classroom. During this pre-referral stage, some districts implement an RTI, short for Resistance to Intervention. The RTI provides a student the opportunity to learn through more intensive instruction. After the intervention, the RTI team assesses whether the student has benefited from this more intensive instruction or not. Through the pre-referral stage and with the assistance of an RTI, schools can better identify those students who truly qualify for special education. Those students who benefit from the intervention will stay in the general education classrooms, learning from differentiated instruction. Those students who do not benefit will be referred for an evaluation. The referral. A referral is an official request by a school administrator to evaluate a student for a disability and, if one is present, to determine that student's specific educational needs. During the referral stage, educators and family members begin the process of fully evaluating the student's needs academically, socially, and behaviorally before an identification, which is the next step in the IEP process, can be made. Identification. The identification of a disability is determined through a full, non-discriminatory evaluation of the student. The student's medical history, family history, his social habits, academic performance, and other things regarding the child are considered to see if he has a disability and is a candidate for special education. The parents of the student must be given written notice before the evaluation can begin. The notice must include the evaluation process as well as the parent's legal rights. The notice has to be written in a format that is clear and easy to understand. For students who have been identified as having a disability and eligible for services, the evaluation serves as the initial data to form the IEP. Eligibility. After the evaluation and identification process, the eligibility stage establishes whether a student is eligible for special education, and if so, what related services he should receive. If the student is not eligible for special education, the general education teacher continues to be responsible for his education. If he is eligible for special education, the IEP team shares the responsibility for his education. Who are members of the IEP team? Parents, the student if appropriate, intervention specialists, administrators, those who provide special services, and the general education teachers all work together as a team to provide an appropriate, individualized education for the student. Development of the IEP. At the developmental stage of the IEP process, the IEP team reviews the results of the evaluation to determine what individualized goals will be set for the student to achieve academic success, as well as what services will be used for him to reach that success. Depending on the child's age and behavior, there are some variances to the IEP. For infants to children under the age of 3, an Individualized Family Service Plan, or IFSP, is developed instead of the traditional IEP. The IFSP provides services to the child with disabilities as well as his family. An IEP for students age 16 or older must also include a transition component that outlines the plan for the student to transition from high school to college, vocational training, or the workforce. If a student with an IEP has behavioral issues, a behavior specialist will be added to the IEP team to help create a behavioral intervention plan in addition to his IEP to benefit the student. The IEP specifies what would be an appropriate education for the student. It stipulates how much the child will take part in the general education curriculum, what accommodations and modifications he will receive, as well as the related services he will need to support his learning goals. If a student is not participating in the general education curriculum due to their disability, the IEP will specify how the child's learning will be evaluated through alternate assessment. Of course, the goals and objectives on all IEPs must be observable and measurable in order to verify the student has reached his learning targets. Implementation of the IEP. Once the IEP is developed, the next stage in the process is implementing its use. As the IEP is applied to the student's education, there may arise a need to alter the IEP to better serve the student. Minor adjustments to the goals or benchmarks in the IEP are allowed in order to fine-tune the document. However, any change to the IEP in regard to services, placement, or major changes in the IEP goals requires notification of the parent as well as a meeting of the IEP team. The final step in the IEP process is evaluating and reviewing the progress a student is making. Is the IEP meeting the needs of the student? Most states require that IEPs be reviewed annually. An IEP's value can be measured through assessment. Assessments can include teacher assessments, district or state assessments, or an alternate assessment. No matter the assessment type, the evaluation is meant to guide instruction to help the student reach his full potential. If the evaluation and review prove the IEP to be ineffective in assisting the student's learning, the IEP team will develop an improved plan. IEPs are a communication tool. Every teacher should be aware of his student's goals, objectives, and special education services. To be confident you are providing an appropriate education entitled to your students, every general education teacher should know the contents of the student's IEPs. To learn more about special education and the IEP and its purpose, review these resources.